thrilled to be able to talk today, titled the presentation For the Beauty of the Earth, which is a beautiful hymn that actually focuses quite a bit on the natural world. And after listening to it online, I think it's also the tune that we sing when we have our harvest home in October. So it's doubly significant for our congregation. So my name is Jackie Shearhart. I'm going to start out talking a little bit about the scriptural basis of creation care. I am not a biblical scholar, so it's something that I learned quite a bit about myself while preparing this. Could talk a little bit about as well the scriptural basis of opponents of creation care. Again, probably not a completely comprehensive look, but kind of place sort of the counter argument to some of the things. Think a little bit about what Jesus would say about the environment. And then probably the largest part of this presentation will really be focusing upon the activities of church and society over the years. And we'll finish up with some thoughts about how we as individuals can help take care of creation. And the slide that I'm using here is actually a picture of one of our sunflowers. So I'll talk a little bit about our garden today, and this is one of our more glorious sunflowers. So God created the world and beyond. Beginning of the Bible, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. So this is scripture that we're all very familiar with. And having grown up in the 60s, one of the most fantastic aspects of the space program is that we had the opportunity to actually take photographs of the earth. And it is indeed very beautiful. How many are your works, O Lord? In wisdom you made them all. The earth is full of your creatures. There is the sea, vast and spacious, teeming with creatures beyond number, living things both large and small. And the Psalms are full of praise for creation and recognition of the wonders of nature. And a number of years ago, we had the opportunity to take our family to Belize and snorkel and see firsthand some of the wonders of the undersea life. Okay, well, God created the world and beyond. We go to John. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. Christ is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things were created by him and for him, from Colossians. And a major thing on my bucket list, well, actually I've completed it. It's a few years ago, probably about 5 years now. Bob and I went to Alaska, and I was able to see the northern lights, and they were just absolutely wonderful. And you know, yet another example of the beauty of the natural world. God owns creation. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it, for he founded it upon the seas and established it upon the waters. And this is actually repeated in various places in the Bible. The Lord is the great God, the great King above all gods. In his hand are the depths of the earth, and the mountain peaks belong to him. The sea is his, for he made it, and his hands formed the dry land. And when I was a child, we had, I don't know why we had this, but we had a picture of Mount Fuji, my parents' house. And I thought all mountains were supposed to be. And my parents, we didn't travel very much as a family. My brother and I would spend too much time fighting for us to spend a lot of time in the car. And we took a vacation to the Adirondack Mountains. I grew up in upstate New York in the Finger Lakes region, another beautiful part of the country, although when you grow up in it, you take it for granted. You don't really appreciate it until you leave and you discover, the rest of the world is not quite that pretty. So we were going to the Adirondack Mountains, and I was so excited as a child because I thought I was going to see a snow-capped peak. And we got there and I actually wept because I was so disappointed that there was no snow on these mountains. These are much smaller mountains. Now, we spent many summers in the Adirondacks, and I really grew to love the natural beauty of the Adirondacks, but I've never quite forgotten that initial first impression. So God loves and cherishes creation. And this slide actually dovetails really nicely with Pastor Cindy's message for this week. The Lord is good to all. He has compassion on all he has made. The Lord is faithful to all his promises and loving towards all he has made. And here we have the rainbow, the physical symbol of the Lord's compassion and commitment towards people, particularly following the flood. So we see that as a recurring symbol in the Bible. The Bible does mandate that we care for the earth. Again, in Genesis, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. And to borrow a little bit from Pastor Daniel, here is some artwork from Thomas Cole of the Garden of Eden. This is he lived in the 1800s. He's an American artist. You must keep my decrees and my laws, and if you defile the land, it will vomit you out as it vomited out the nations that were before you. Now, I just couldn't resist this quote because it's particularly kind of graphic, but it does kind of really emphasize the relationship between our faith and being true to our faith, and how the relationship to the integrity of the land, which is there to take care of us if we are not faithful to it and to each other and to God. You shall not pollute the land in which you live. You shall not defile the land in which you live, in which I also, for I, the Lord, dwell among the Israelites. And there in the Bible, it's pretty clear that there is a relationship between the laws of God, the expectations to care for the earth, and the ability of the earth to care for us. And so here we have a picture from the Dust Bowl days where poor practices of farming exhausted the soil and basically took away its ability to support farming and grow food for people. The Bible mandates that we care for the earth. The next passage is from Leviticus. If you follow my statutes and keep my commandments and observe them faithfully, I will give you your rains in their season, and the land shall yield its produce, and the trees of the field shall yield their fruit. And we are lucky in the United States because we do have the ability to grow a lot of food. Now, this is kind of an interesting thing because probably most of us, if you go back 2, 3, 4 generations, have farmers in our family. It was very typical to have, at least if you didn't live solely on a farm, you at least got some of your sustenance from a farm. And nowadays, if you ask a young child, where does their food come from? They would say the grocery store. So we've kind of lost our connection to some degree, the recognition that our food does ultimately come from the land. So we have damaged the earth in the past. So I brought you into a plentiful land to eat its fruits and its good things, but when you entered, you defiled my land and made my heritage an abomination. Again, from Jeremiah, it will be made a wasteland, parched and desolate before me. The whole land will be laid waste because there is no one who cares. Hosea, there is no faithfulness, no love, no acknowledgement of God's land. There's only cursing, lying, and murder, stealing and adultery. They break all bounds, and bloodshed follows bloodshed. Because of this, the land mourns, and all who live in it waste away. The beasts of the field and the birds of the air and the fish of the sea are dying. And in more current times, we've seen a series of pretty massive events, the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, Currently, and this picture is of a fish kill, and this is actually something that has happened in a number of locations, and it's related in part to the warming of the oceans. And I have a background in science, so those of you who know me probably know that I don't always subscribe to a completely literal interpretation of the Bible. I believe in evolution, but I do go to my faith, go to the Bible for, at least for Genesis, to a good degree for an understanding of why, not necessarily the details of how. But as a chemist, kind of an interesting thing is that you probably know that you can dissolve solids better in hot water. I grew up in upstate New York. One of the foods there is something called salt potatoes. If anybody's been there, it's a very local thing. You put a large degree of salt in water and you dump potatoes in. And I, as a child, tried to make this on my own. And I basically tested the solution limit of how much salt you could dissolve in hot water. And the potatoes that came out of that particular batch were inedible. They were so salty. But cold water holds more gases than hot water. So as the seas warm up, oxygen can be dissolved. And can result in massive deaths of fish and other water life. So there is a very, very strong link between warming of the oceans and the inability of the ocean water to support life. And this could be moving forward, if we see large changes in the temperature of water, this could become even more significant. So moving forward, woe to you who add house to house and join field to field, till no space is left and you live alone in the land. The Lord Almighty has declared in my hearing, surely the great houses will become desolate, the fine mansions left without occupants. A 10-acre vineyard will produce only a bath of wine, a homer of seed, only an ephah of grain. Now, the second part of that I don't really understand because I don't know what a bath of wine is, except that it doesn't sound very appealing to take a bath in wine. But the beginning of this really resonates with me. As we've lived in Naperville since 1989. And when we first moved to the East Highlands, which is a neighborhood that's a walking distance from the church, we bought a classic 1958 split level house, about 1,400 or 1,800 square feet, somewhere in there. That's what they ran. Had a one-car garage. Over the past 30 years, we've seen these actually lovely little homes get knocked down, and they build much, much larger homes, which are I mean, also lovely in their own way. I don't mean to demean them. But this is a aerial picture I plucked from Zillow or something. And one of the things that is quite striking is that when these smaller homes are knocked down, very typically people take off most of the trees in the property in order to build the larger, $1 to $2 million home. And you can even see that in this aerial photograph. This becomes a little bit of an issue in terms of when it rains, the water needs to go somewhere. If you've got a giant house built right to the limits of where the lot lines are, then you have nowhere for the water to go. And this is quite a problem in some areas because the water accumulates, it pools in people's backyards, it enters people's basements, and it becomes kind of a contest to become the highest, to try to avoid these problems with the water. And this is something that Naperville in certain locations really struggles with. And it's a problem, and it's sort of a link to the environmental aspects. And, to some degree, the families that are living in these large houses are not bigger families. They're still, maybe 2 or 3 kids. So we've become somewhat gluttonous in our desire for space. So in summary, God made all of creation. Our earth and all of creation is fundamentally good. We need the earth for our sustenance. Again, as modern Americans, we may not recognize that, but we absolutely do. All of our food is a formerly living thing, be it animal or plant. We have the responsibility for the earth's care. And when we distance ourselves from God and our responsibilities as God's people, which includes taking care of the planet, the earth suffers. Okay, so this seems pretty clear. So how do people support the idea that we don't need to care for creation? Because there's definitely movements that are supportive of this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. What is the scriptural basis for not taking care of creation? Well, one argument is we don't really need to worry because God says he'll always take care of us. So you can point to Matthew. Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? And, we're enjoying a lot of birds now with the spring. Cardinals, well, we have them pretty much year round, and there's certainly lots of geese, which some can argue whether are favorable things or not. But at one point in time, I can remember growing up that the Canada geese were actually somewhat endangered, and now they've made quite a comeback. So the scriptural basis of not caring for creation, and this is something that Pastor Daniel talked about in one of his sermons a week or so back, has to do with the concept dominion. So there is a well-quoted phrase from Genesis. Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So this is our one breakout. What does dominion over creation mean to you? And secondly, can you think of stories involving Jesus that might help us define dominion? And Pastor Daniel, I'm hoping you can
those ready to go.
Well, I hope you all had good conversations. In my room, we didn't get past the first question, so we have room for discussion at a later time. Okay, so the word dominion in Merriam-Webster means supreme authority. It does come from the Latin dominus for lord and master, so it does have this sort of implication of kind of holding your thumb down and controlling people. But biblically, I think dominion really means more of a stewardship kind of role, sort of a responsibility and a caring kind of meaning. And I kind of think, again, I found a random picture of a shepherd, like a modern day shepherd. But this is another kind of biblical sort of relationship, is that we think of a shepherd as having complete dominion over his flock, but he would never abuse the flock. He would be nothing but caring, responsible stewardship, loving care. And I really think that's a sort of a better reflection of the biblical meaning of dominion as it relates to caring for creation. Another kind of argument one sometimes encounters is what happens on earth doesn't matter. It's just a matter of having enough faith to get into heaven. And one can make an argument based on a number of verses. For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. For by the grace you have been saved through faith. This is not your own doing. It is the gift of God, not the result of works, so that no one may boast. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. So one can extract individual verses from the Bible and kind of give it a bent that says, yes, all that matters is faith. I can do whatever I want on earth as long as I have faith. That's good enough. And in a strict sense, I suppose that is true. But it is also clear that if you have faith and you completely absorb the message of the Bible, then you should be doing the things that God would have you do, which I would argue would include caring for our earth. So our Methodist tradition does, if you go to the scriptures, state that faith is sufficient. I have to thank Pastor Daniel here for helping me with this, because I did not grow up Methodist. I grew up Episcopalian, and I was a very intermittent church attender because my family was very intermittent. So most of my knowledge is really based on adult study of the Bible. So faith is sufficient. And while it is of utmost importance, our actions, what we do every day, how we treat people, how we deal with the earth, do we recycle? These actions are our response to our faith, and you cannot divorce the two from one another. Okay, so what would Jesus say about the environment? Now, I have something I purchased recently was a green Bible. You've probably seen Bibles which have the words of Jesus colored in red or pink, so you can find them easily. This green Bible has everything that's theoretically an environmentally related quote colored in green. So I've gone through it a little bit. Some of the quotes are clearly related to environmental issues. Other, I think you have to be a little more creative. But the quote that I think that Jesus stated that I think really relates the most is the one that we're all familiar with, which is, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." And this was, related to the story of the Good Samaritan, which I remember hearing as a child. You've got the priest, the Levite, and the Samaritan. Sounds like the beginning of a joke. And I didn't really understand it initially as a child because I didn't know what a Levite and what a Samaritan were. They were kind of just, random words. But it is clear that it isn't really supposed to be taken from the part of the victim and who likes the person who's good to them and takes care of them, which is kind of the way I interpreted it as a child. But sometimes the people that we are supposed to be good to are the people that it's hard to think that we even should be good to, because the Samaritans, for historical reasons, were people that were utterly despised by the Christ and his disciples and their country. So it's not an easy thing. So who is our neighbor? Well, clearly our actual neighbors are our neighbors. Those who are impacted by our inactions or actions, those near us, those far away, and I would argue in the present day and in the future. And this becomes important because many of our actions and our inactions with regards to the environment will impact people in the future far more than they do now. And I have heard people in my extended family who are a generation in front of me who say, well, I don't really care because I'm not going to be alive then, which is not a particularly loving view towards one's children and descendants, because our actions do matter to those people. Okay. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Because I'm going to move from the biblical aspects of this session to more concrete actions of our team of church and society. Okay.
Yeah, this is John Bodine. I guess I would, when you were bringing up the slide about neighbors, I was thinking not only of people as neighbors, but other living things that we live amongst and are dependent upon to be alive.
Oh, absolutely. And, that thinking about other living things, again, I'm a biochemist and I read the scientific literature, and we are losing many, many species, not as much in the United States, but in other parts of the world. And that might seem very distant and something we shouldn't worry about, but many first generation drugs come from exotic plants and sometimes exotic animals. And to the degree that we're losing access to these plants and animals, we're losing potential access to future medications that can benefit people. And that might seem like an indirect thing, but it is a loss, and it might directly impact human health. That's a little bit of an aside. Oh,
I'll share reflecting on that in John's comment there, and Jackie, your follow-up on animals. Also an aside or insight is, there are some churches that offer animal blessings. And I grew up in a church in my campus ministry in college that would do a regular annual animal blessing. And then I've been to churches and I've served in churches where that's not only a foreign idea, but almost a laughed at idea, right? Kind of the absurdity of using something as formal and sacred as a liturgy to bless your pet dog or your cat or any other animal. So there's very different perspectives on that. And I could see how in some cases that kind of animal blessing is viewed as a modern intrude, right? We care so much for our animals. The pet industry is a multi-billion-dollar pet industry. So now we're just trying to bring the church into that kind of corporate world. But we forget that blessing animals like that is a historic part of our church tradition. One could go back to the scriptures in the way that Jesus speaks of the mother hen sheltering, the chicks. But probably the most vivid example of that would be St. Francis of Assisi, that medieval monk that really reset our understanding of our relationship to the natural world. And that's been a thread throughout our Christian tradition. So, pet blessings, as kind of hokey as maybe they can come across, is nothing new. And it recognizes, John, what you're talking about in terms of our greater connection, as I preached on in Genesis 2, when Adam names the animals, right? That sacred relationship that God grants us. So anyway, that's been
actually, Grace used to do blessings for animals. I think it was largely dogs that came, although because we have cats and they would be more upset by being blessed amidst a pile of dogs than I.
He's offered a pet blessing every year that I've been here.
Yes, all except this past year with the pandemic, because my husband and I have taken our dog Buddy the past several years to Grace, and it was interesting, kind of an eerie thing. He was doing very well until he missed his most recent pet blessing and came down with oral cancer in January. So I don't know, but we participated and felt it was a wonderful link to Grace Church.
Thank you.
We've done it for the past 12 years, I believe.
Yeah, that's a great tradition, but not to, sorry to hijack a bit, but
well, we should bring that going back when we can. I think the light at the end of the tunnel is shining, and we will be able to resume that. So one of the things that we instituted first at Grace was actually recycling. Our group started around 2008 and 2009. We had a small budget, and we purchased and instituted recycling bins within the church. There actually weren't any prior to that time. So classrooms, the library, the music rooms, the copy room all now have recycling bins that they came from our efforts. Likewise, we started collecting styrofoam and recyclable plastics. This is a sign that actually came from one of the church picnics. The church picnics, which I think we stopped 4 or 5 years ago, different teams in the church would take on different roles, and we took on as an additional role collecting like the ice cream cups and the plastic drink cups. We would rinse them out and we would take them to a recycling facility that could take care of them, just to keep them out of the landfill. Currently, we are recycling styrofoam. We dovetail with the drive-through communion. So today, there is actually going to be a styrofoam collection. It is on Sunday of the month. And this is what we accumulated from our last collection. And so you can see that there's quite a bit there. There's a combination of packing styrofoam and food styrofoam. So if you get carry out food, which many of us have been doing because we're trying to keep our favorite restaurants open during the pandemic, we do have to separate it when we take it to DART. DART is a facility in Aurora that has the capacity to collect the styrofoam, which is also numbered number 6. Now there's 2 kinds of number 6. There's the styrofoam number 6, and there is a hard plastic number 6. They do not recycle the hard plastic number 6. And so you have to kind of be careful. So you do need to rinse it out a little bit, and it does need to be separated, but if need be, we can separate it. So this is something that's been very successful. This is quite a mound of styrofoam that we're keeping out of the landfill. We started a garden around 2008, 2009. Pastor Lisa Tellerman, as many of you recall, was almost like a one-person nominations team. She would call you up and say, I think you'd be good for this. And so she actually helped initiate Church and Society. And this seemed to relate very nicely with the Garden of Eden. So we started a garden. And this is a picture of our plot behind the church. Now, what we first intended to do was to plant a range of vegetables and to take the harvest and donate them to a food pantry. And I believe it was Chris St. John who reached out to a number of food pantries, and lo and behold, they did not want the vegetables. It was too hard to transport. It would be hard for them to distribute. It's not like we were a huge garden. So they said they would really, thank you very much, but we would prefer cash donations. So here's another picture. This is actually, I think it's Tony St. John, a few years back. He's one of our recent confirmands. So this is a few years ago. So you can see he's probably assisting his mother in weeding our garden. So we would grow the produce, gather it, and we would offer it for cash donations at the church. And this is a photograph that I kind of like because it shows the tomatoes and the kale and where we gathered the cash. And in the background, you can see the garden. Now, the garden was actually a lot of work. Anybody who's taken care of a garden realizes that. You have to till the soil. You need to enhance the soil to some degree, and we've maintained our garden as an organic garden, so we would add peat and other natural products to enhance the soil's ability to grow things. And you plant, then you have to weed, and then you have to water. We actually had a schedule whereby we would water every day. Sometimes we would be very lucky and there'd be a lot of rain. Sometimes we wouldn't be so lucky. And so there's really a lot of care that is required in maintaining a garden, not only to water it, but to weed it. And then when things are ready to harvest, you have to be there when they need to be picked. So over time, it became difficult to maintain the garden. So here's another picture, basically with the sign. So we would gather the money, and then at the end of the season, we typically had somewhere around $200 to $300. We made a donation to Naperville Loaves and Fishes. So when we had difficulty fully staffing our group to the ability to water, maintain, and harvest, we switched to sunflowers. And here's a picture of my husband, Bob, who is 6'2". So you should have an appreciation that these plants are monstrous. This is, I think, 2 to 3 years ago. Here's Pastor Daniel's kids. And this was just an absolutely fantastic harvest. The advantage of sunflowers is that spot behind the church is perfect for sunflowers. Very, very sunny spot. You can plant them. Once they're established, they're almost like trees. They are very good at not requiring daily watering, and you can harvest them largely at the same time. And so Bob and I harvested them. I think this is 2 years ago, and we picked the heads and learned that you needed to dry them quite a bit. So we set up a scaffolding. Actually, this is the royal we, which is actually Bob, set up a scaffolding in our garage to dry out the heads. We had a little bit of a crisis because apparently a chipmunk got trapped in our garage. Now, the chipmunk thought he'd landed in heaven because he went to town on some of the sunflowers and just totally shredded a few of them. So we ended up having to figure out a way to deal with the partially shredded sunflower heads and the intact sunflower heads. But we had quite a few. So we generated, I went to Goodwill. So an example of kind of repurposing, I got this basket for not very much money, and then generated gift baskets that we utilized from Mistletoe Marketplace. So you can see that this particular basket's got some corn for the squirrels, a large head, a small head, some free sunflower seeds. And so we packaged this as sort of a nature gift basket. This is the full load, and the free sunflower seeds that came from the partially destroyed heads are actually packaged in washed out spaghetti sauce jars where the lids were painted green. And then we packaged either free heads or the free sunflower seeds in various ways. So I think we contributed this to Mistletoe Marketplace, and I think this ended up yielding somewhere around $125, $130 for mistletoe. So it ended up going to missions. So that was a very satisfying yield as well. So church and society, as Pastor Daniel mentioned, if you go to the sort of the national website, it actually encompasses quite a bit more than environmental issues. It does touch upon civil and human rights, economic justice, environmental justice, women and children. So lots of social justice issues. And if you like, you can go and you can kind of explore this more on that website. Now, some of the activities we do touch upon those aspects of church and society. Up until the pandemic, we would routinely sell fair trade coffee, tea, and chocolate. This is from a few years back, where we have Chris St. John and me. We are setting up the fair trade table, and you've probably seen us doing this. The fair trade coffee, if you might not be familiar with the concept of fair trade, we get our coffee, tea, and chocolate from the United Methodist Committee on Relief. Actually works with an organization called Equal Exchange, and they have a mission to generate trade partnerships with small farmers in other countries for the most part. The idea is to compete with large conglomerates and have a more favorable business relationship with small farmers and between them and the consumers. So they've helped establish worker cooperatives and fair trade all over the world. Their partners are largely in Africa, Asia. There's a few in the United States, South and Central America. The fair trade regulations make sure that the coffee is what they call ethically sourced, that they don't involve child labor or forced labor. And you can go to the UMCOR Equal Exchange website and explore this further. During the pandemic, actually, I really missed access to this coffee. And then I realized, what am I waiting for? Anybody can buy coffee from their website. So I have been logging in and buying coffee. And one of the things that we do when we will establish our website is this is what the website looks like. So if you liked what we provided at church, which we sold at cost, you can go and get it directly yourself. Just type in Equal Exchange, UMCOR, coffee, and this will pop up. It's very easy to use. And the prices are actually competitive or better than what you would get at, let's say, Trader Joe's for fair trade. So here's our materials. And there we have Neil, Pastor Lisa, Linda, Bodine, and myself. And this is from a few years back. We have hosted on an annual basis, except for during the pandemic, something that we call the Christmas Around the World Craft Bazaar. Basically, we would invite different organizations and enable people to purchase Christmas gifts. It would be kind of unusual ones from organizations such as 10,000 Villages. 10,000 Villages, which has brick and mortar stores in Glen Ellen, Oak Park, and Evanston, or at least they used to. I don't know how they fared during the pandemic. Basically has a lot of really lovely craft items, everything ranging from jewelry to ornaments to maybe handmade soap, scarves, lots of kind of fun things that benefit people in other countries. War Chest is an organization. WAR stands for Women at Risk. And this is a nonprofit that really focuses upon battling sex trafficking and help rescue victims from sex trafficking. You might not appreciate this because in this day and age, it's sort of easy to think, well, there's no such thing as slavery or that kind of abuse anymore. But if you go to their website, the US State Department says that there's somewhere between 1/2 to 1 million people that are actually trafficked internationally every year. And actually some of these are in the United States, somewhere around 10 to 15,000. Most of these are women, some of them are children. So this is an organization that works globally to try to help women out of these situations and then help them to transition back into society. North Central College has a group called Enactus. They used to be called SIFE, which stands for Students in Free Enterprise. It engaged students who were interested in kind of the business aspects and social justice to develop relationships with craftspeople in other parts of the world. I think they worked with people in Costa Rica and possibly Guatemala, and they would actually come to the craft bazaar and offer items. And this is direct trade, meaning somebody traveled from North Central College to that location, obtained items, brought them back and sold them. So this is, of course, very beneficial because you have less middlemen involved in and taking a piece of the cut. So another very good relationship. Beads of Hope we've had, they basically have necklaces made of rolled up paper that generates craft necklaces, and they come from Africa. And then Special Sparkle is actually kind of a local young lady with Down syndrome who has sold jewelry that she makes. So we had and then we would offer our fair trade items as well. The river sweep. We have done the river sweep many times. This is a picture from 2014. Basically, this is an annual event whereby people gather on a Saturday morning. This is coming up. We get bags and pokers and gloves provided from the local conservation foundation. And we basically go out and we help clean the parks and the banks around the river. And this is a program that's kind of near and dear to my heart. And they're going to have it again this year in 2021. And I have signed up to be a local leader. I have claimed the area that the church is on, the Lincoln Parkway across the river, and the public areas of the Riverwalk spanning from Hillside, so the beginning of the Riverwalk near the church, from Hillside to downtown. So this is always a lot of fun. It's an excuse to go be outside. We often see a lot of animals walking, ducks and geese. Once in a while, if you're really lucky, you'll see something like a muskrat or a beaver or deer. So it's a lot of fun. Please, if this is something that's interesting to you, this is going to be May 15th from 9 till noon. So it's a morning kind of activity, but I do need to register in order to get enough of the supply. So reach out to me if this is something of interest to you. Okay, and that's a couple emails there. With the social justice kind of aspect, several members of our group, along with Jill Rye from Race and Religion, actually participated in a interfaith interview process of the city council members. So basically, there were 3 sets of questions. One was focused on criminal justice reform, actually asking about the council candidates' opinions on body cameras and eliminating cash bonds, which is a mechanism that kind of keeps people that are unable to afford the bonds in prison awaiting the justice system as opposed to being free. Another set of questions were focused on affordable housing. Something that I hadn't realized prior to participating in this is that the state of Illinois actually requires communities with less than 10% of affordable housing to try to generate a plan to have more affordable housing. And Naperville is actually the largest city that fails to have 10% or more affordable housing. We've actually decreased the number of affordable housing. It's gone from about 9.4% back in 2003 to about a 7.5% now. And it's probably not a surprise in that we see that what formerly affordable housing, single family units being knocked down and generating, very large houses in their stead. So there was a series of questions focused on basically whether a candidate thought we needed more affordable housing, and if so, what mechanisms they felt might be the most successful to achieve that goal. And then finally, the third set of questions involved human rights and discrimination. Probably are all somewhat aware of the negative news regarding Naperville with the Buffalo Wild Wings incident, the Bucky gas station incident, sort of focusing on, is there a problem with racial discrimination in Naperville? If so, what kinds of activities do you think would be appropriate to kind of combat that? And I learned from that process that actually the city government has been working to increase minority representation in jobs in the city of Naperville. So it was kind of an interesting process. And then one of the questions was related to that candidate opinion on the Islamic Center that is going to be built in South Naperville. So that is actually a process that was really related to social justice issues with the committee. And again, criminal justice reform, affordable housing, and human rights. Now, we came in kind of late in the game here. In 2 years, when we have another city council election, I think it's 2 years. I think they have rotating spots. I'm hoping to maintain the relationship with the people that generated this interfaith group of to ask these questions and add an environmentally focused set of questions. I think that'd be a nice addition to this. We are partnering with a group called Faith in Place. The local representative is a fellow named Dan Hunshaw. Not going to talk a lot about this, but this is an organization that brings people of all faiths together to kind of share resources, educate one another, and advocate for environmental issues. So that's something that we're working on as well. And Dan Hunshaw will actually be joining us with the river sweep. So we'll enable him to see our little corner of the world, and he'll help us clean it up. Many of you might have picked up some Lenten supplies. We generated a bookmark to kind of promote green issues. So buying local, advantages of dropping temperature in your house in the wintertime, switching to LED bulbs, promoting recycling, and the advantages of going meatless. And I think we still have a lot of these bookmarks, so you'll probably see them if you don't already have one. Okay. Habits that are good for the earth are good for our health. During the pandemic, we've kind of adopted some of these. So biking or walking instead of driving or flying. We are an increasingly overweight and obese society. So if you become more active, this can help you battle those problems. Time in nature versus time in theme parks. Again, many of us have found that one of the side effects of the pandemic is that we are driven to nature because it is always available to us. So we are lucky in Naperville to have many parks and forest preserves to go spend time in. Eating more vegetarian. When I was growing up, I ate meat and a vegetable. My mother is horrified at the idea of being vegetarian, but something that I was happy to learn is I've went through my 20s is that there are many ways to prepare vegetables that are very tasty that are typically associated with other countries. So if you want to explore vegetarian eating, trying Indian cuisine, Thai cuisine, Chinese cuisine, if you include spices with vegetables, they become much more palatable. Preparing food from fresh ingredients. They say that you should go to the grocery store and stay at the edges. Don't hang out in the middle. That's where all the boxes and the cans are. That can be better for you as well. Board games versus computer games, spending time together versus in front of the screen. It's kind of ironic since we're all sitting in front of a screen right now. At any rate, small changes add up. So what can we do as an individual? Kind of goes back to the recycle, reuse, reduce. So I don't know about you, but as I get older, I don't really need more stuff. And I find that having an experience is something that in some ways is more valuable than things. When my children who are adults spend time with me, that is immensely more gratifying to me than having objects. You can reduce stuff by doing things like I know it's really easy to buy books on Amazon, but if you go to the library, that saves part of a tree generating paper. I have a very old Kindle, and I find that it's really great to download books and carry them around. And I can carry 100 books on my Kindle very, very easily. It weighs less than half a pound. We used to have a coffee pot at work, and somehow it's evolved to the point where almost everybody has their own K-cup machines. I use a public one, but I have a refillable K-cup thing. So those little plastic things just get thrown out. I wished I'd known years ago that bottling water would be a thing. It's kind of astounding that is. I use a water bottle and I refill it and put it in the fridge over and over. Buying locally is better. We have mainland farms in Naperville, and there's the nature conservation. You can buy membership and get organic produce from them. It's better than going to the grocery store and getting food that's been transported from very, very distant locations. Reuse. If you've got things that you are done with, there's a lot of places they can go besides the garbage. Goodwill will take almost anything. Hesed House, if you've got linens in particular, towels, twin sheets, they are very happy to accept those things. Sharing Connections is an organization in Downers Grove that collects household goods to provide, help set up homes for homeless people and refugees. And then again, recycling. Our group attended an online talk by the woman that runs Scarce. We're not as good at recycling as we think we are. Some recycling ends up in the landfill, but the degree that we can, it is good. And you can go to the Naperville website and learn what to best recycle. Not everything does get recycled. And so there are things that if you go to the Scarce website, that's an organization that used to be, I think in Glen Ellen, it moved to Addison. They've got more space there. It's an enormous amount of useful information there. So this is a graphic that is really appealing and going to be kind of a central focus of our team. So I am only one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can do. And this is from Edward Everett Hale. Basically just shows that every little bit counts. So if you don't feel like that you matter, if you think about the millions of people all doing one small thing, that really adds. So it is important, and it can be very, very meaningful. We have some coming events. The Dupage River Sweep is 2 weeks from yesterday. Please reach out to me if this is of interest to you. I kind of committed to a pretty good chunk of land, so it would be nice to have a lot of people help out. Very easy to social distance, just walk around and pick up trash. I do need to know ahead of time though, because I need to get enough supplies. We have a children's event coming in partnership with the children's group and Seamus. And then we're working on a section on the Grace website, somewhat analogous to the one on Commission on Race and Religion. So these are some of the sources that I utilized. I also kind of did random Googling, and of course, Pastor Daniel was very helpful. And our team is composed of these people who've been super, super helpful in helping me craft this presentation. And if you'd like to join us, we'd be thrilled to have more members. And boy, I think that's it.